here towards the end of the show. But Lucas, let's start where it just means the more. Like it just means the most, just means more. Lucas and I are big time SEC homers. Um, so the SEC announced its new scheduling format. They announced essentially in 2024 at least. We don't know anything else besides 2024. Who will be playing who? Um, Lucas, we kind of maligned the SEC for going to an 8 game or to sticking with an 8 game conference schedule. Despite having 16 teams, they will be the only league with 16 teams that is playing an 8 game conference schedule. They announced the opponents on SEC Network last week. What were your kind of main takeaways? And then we'll kind of get into kind of what teams did well, what teams didn't.
Yeah, I think my main takeaway was the schedule looks awesome, and it would look even better if they added one more game.
Yeah.
It basically is the type of schedule that I think we thought they were going to do. It's just an 8 game schedule. It's only 1 year. And what I hope is that it goes off really, really well, and that ESPN and the SEC are like, hey, we got great viewership doing a schedule like this. This is what fans want to see. This is what they want to pay for. And I hope that they continue this. I think it keeps 2024, it keeps all the mandatory kind of primary and secondary rivalries. You're still having Alabama playing Tennessee and Auburn. Auburn is still playing Georgia and Alabama. Georgia's still playing Florida and Auburn. And the list goes on and on. We get Texas and Texas A&M. I think Oklahoma and Mizzou playing again for the first time since their Big 12 days, I think is really, really nice to see. And it was just cool, the same with the Big 10, just seeing the schedule that, you see some uncommon opponents with some of these SC teams. Like I'm looking at, Oklahoma is going to play South Carolina and Alabama and Tennessee in their first year, and Ole Miss and LSU. Like it's really, really fun to look at this and just kind of visualize in your head what this is going to look like. I mean, we're only about a year out from this being a reality, and now seeing it on a schedule is pretty cool. Like I said, I think this is the best thing we could have gotten besides the 9 game schedule. And like I said, hopefully this just leads into eventually just going to a 9 game schedule so that you can keep schedule like this intact. But even if they don't, I'm already just excited about this because, like we said, with this new format, you're going to play every team within a 2-year span. We're not going to go 6-7 years like we do right now in the SEC, where you go playing certain opponents. And everyone, if you play your whole college career, you're going to be able to play in every single venue, and you're also going to be able to host every single opponent. So I think even if this is just the case, they say an 8 game schedule, still much better than what the status quo was.
Yeah, that was really my takeaway as well. Is you're going the SEC and the ACC with their model where you have 7 teams in each division, so you have 8 conference games. You play 6 teams in your division, then you play an annual crossover opponent, right? So for LSU it was Florida, Alabama it was Tennessee, for Georgia it was Auburn, right, etc. And then you only have 1 rotating opponent. So really 7 of your 8 conference games are the same every year. Mm-hmm. And now, like you talked about, right? Like you look at this schedule, it's like, all right, Alabama is going to play Missouri, Georgia, and South Carolina in addition to Tennessee. They play 5 traditional SEC East opponents with Tennessee and Vanderbilt, right? Texas A&M is going to play Missouri. They're going to play LSU. They're going to play at Florida. They're going to play at South Carolina. Missouri's going to play at Alabama and Auburn and Arkansas. So instead of getting the same matchups every year, you're going to get some fun ones, right? And so that was my one takeaway. And I think, like you said, the other one is just it's when you add Texas and Oklahoma, you're just going to have so many fun games every week. I mean, I can't wait to see how they stack this schedule, because you're just every week you're going to have 2 or 3 really marquee games, mm-hmm. right? And I looked at some of these teams and kind of breaking down kind of who maybe came out with an easier schedule, who came out with a more challenging schedule. And we can talk about that here shortly, but, everyone's going to play everyone. Yeah. I mean, you have Texas playing Georgia and Florida, right? You have Oklahoma playing Alabama. You have Georgia plays Alabama next year, right? Mm-hmm. Like, that's a game we might not have gotten for 3 or 4 more years, right? Like, under the old system, Georgia and Alabama played what, every 6 years,
Six
every
years,
7 years? Yeah, like LSU would play Georgia every 6 or 7 years, right? Texas A&M still hasn't hosted Georgia, I think, since they came into the league, right? You don't get that anymore, and I think that's the exciting thing is like for these fans, like if you're LSU, like you're going to play Georgia twice every 4 years, right? You're going to play South Carolina twice every 4 years, or like whatever it is. I think it's a good thing. I think it's a good thing for college football. It's a good thing for the sport. It's a good thing for the fans. And we'll see about the ninth conference game, right? Because I do think the general reception to this schedule is pretty positive, right?
Mm-hmm.
And if it keeps being positive, and if they can't get any more money from ESPN to try to get an additional ninth game, you might say at 8 games. They might just say screw it, right? The schedule's challenging enough, right? I was watching I happened to be home when the SEC network release show was happening. And it was like Peter Burns and they had Tim Tebow and it was just all SEC love. And they're just going like, who needs a ninth conference game? Look at these schedules. Look at Alabama. They have to play Oklahoma and Georgia. And I'm just sitting here rolling my eyes. I'm like, guys, it's already starting. You're already starting to see the narrative shift to our conference is so good, we don't need a ninth conference game. And that is something I am not for.
They're also ESPN employees too, so they're already propagating that. Yeah, we don't need to pay for 8 or pay for 9 because 8 is already good enough. So yeah, it's the whole spin cycle. This is a zero spin zone though. Here at Running for the Roses, so we still think it's BS. To me, it's just look. They are the best conference, but you can't wave the flag and keep always saying that you're the best conference, but yet refuse to play each other more. When 3 out of the other 5 Power 5 conferences, including the one that you're competing the most against, the Big Ten, already plays 9 conference games. And it's just like, just as a fan, I want to see these teams play more. I don't need to see, for instance, Oklahoma's schedule in 2024. No offense to Temple. I guess they have Tulane on the schedule. But I think they'll probably put in like some FCS as their, or UL Monroe, I think, is going to play Alabama, I think, in 2024. That's what they added. Or no, that was Texas added as their 4th non-conference game that season.
Ballsy for Texas to do that, my goodness.
Exactly. I mean, even more balls here. They're doing it again in 2029. So don't sleep on the upside of UL Monroe. But no, it's already starting. I already feel like we're already going that direction. But the downside is if they do stay at 8, remember, it's not going to be this exact schedule. It is going to be one permanent opponent, and then you're just rotating through the other 7 teams. So your secondary rivalries will not become annual opponents anymore. And I just think really just out of a source of tradition, and we'll get to what the Big Ten did, which I think was kind of a compromise, and I think was really, really smart on their part. I think that's something that the SEC could also implement.
Yeah, we'll get to the Big Ten here in a minute because we're both really, really big fans of kind of how they did their model, going to 16 teams, 9 conference games. Real quick, just a couple notes I had on the individual teams, and then we can move on here. Oklahoma's first year in the league, kind of a doozy. They get Alabama and Tennessee at home. They get LSU and Auburn on the road. Also, the game in Dallas against Texas counts as a home game for them, so they only have 3 true SEC home games. Auburn will continue their tradition of playing Alabama and Georgia every year. Georgia, I think, has a really kind of interesting schedule. They have at Alabama, at Texas as well. Some teams I thought got off a little easier than some of the other teams. Tennessee gets Alabama and Georgia. I get that. Other 6 opponents besides those 2 teams are Florida, Kentucky, Mississippi State, Arkansas, Vanderbilt, and Oklahoma. Arkansas, I believe, is the only team to not play either Georgia or Alabama. And Texas, I thought their first year in the league, and this was kind of a criticism I think some people had, is you look at the schedule Oklahoma got, and you look at the schedule that Texas got. Texas has Florida, Georgia, Kentucky, Mississippi State at home. They have Oklahoma and Dallas. That counts as a kind of a home game for them. So only 3 true road SEC games for the Longhorns in 2024. At Texas A&M, at Arkansas, and at Vanderbilt. You compare that to Oklahoma's first year in the league. They get Alabama, South Carolina, Tennessee at home. So their three home games in the SEC include Alabama and Tennessee, who each went to a New Year's Six bowl, as well as South Carolina. Texas in Dallas counts as a home game for them. The road games are at Auburn, at LSU, at Ole Miss, and at Missouri. Lucas, when you look at some of the teams, anyone kind of standing out, what were your kind of takeaways from what the SEC did?
Yeah, I think one I'm looking at right now more because it ties into their non-conference, but LSU had no idea that they're playing next year both USC and UCLA
Yeah,
on their slate.
right.
Going out to Vegas to play USC and then UCLA, and then obviously still playing Florida and Alabama like they do every year, but then also getting Oklahoma, and then finishing the year at Texas A&M. I think you're just going to try to balance it the way you can. Like we said, this is a one-year schedule, and we kind of talked about at the beginning, there's no way you're going to be able to balance these out perfectly, especially if you are trying to keep some of these primary and secondary rivalries. Like Auburn, for instance, if they keep their secondary rivalries, they're always going to have arguably the toughest schedule historically, right, with Alabama and Georgia on there every year. Same with Tennessee. And so I think they did the best they could. Every year you're going to have people that squeak in and squeak out, but I also think that can help potentially build parity in your league, especially if you give maybe some of the teams like Kentucky, South Carolina, maybe that's the olive branch you give to them to get to 9 games next year is, hey, we'll give you maybe for some of your protected games a little bit of a break. And that way you're able to allow them to rise higher maybe in the hierarchy and build up some more marquee games from the bottom of your league. So I'll be honest, I haven't looked at every single SEC game, but I think they did a fairly decent job at least trying to keep it somewhat balanced as much as they can. But also kudos to LSU for playing 2 power leagues. Same with Georgia. I think they play Clemson next year.
They do.
In addition to Georgia Tech in their SEC slate. So I'm honestly, if they stay at 8, but they say we're committed to playing 2 Power 5 teams in the league, kind of like the ACC does right now,
yeah,
then maybe there's more leeway. But that's really all I have to say on probably on that on a schedule-to-schedule basis.
Yeah, last thing for me before we move on is I'm interested to see how the bottom to middle class of this league fares, right? Because when you talk about realignment, the teams that kind of get lost are the teams fighting to make a bowl game every year, right? Your Missouris, your Arkansas, your Vanderbilts, your South Carolinas. What does that look like, right? Now, they're still going to play 8 conference games. And, last show we talked about how a lot of the teams opposed to 9 games were the middle to bottom class of the league. That just doesn't – they are struggling to make bowl games. They're struggling to get to 6, 7 wins. What does it look like year to year for them, right? If you're Missouri, you knew that you were only going to play 2 SEC West opponents every year. You're going to play Arkansas, and you're going to play whoever your rotating, game was. Well, now that changes, right? Now if you're Missouri, you're going to play 3 or 4 teams from the West, in addition to a Texas or an Oklahoma. It's not going to be easy, right? Texas A&M, we know, did not want Texas in the league, right? That's why they left the Big 12. They wanted to be the SEC team in Texas. And now, I'm really excited. I'm assuming they're going to put Texas and Texas A&M at the end of the year on Thanksgiving night like it usually was. That's going to be an awesome game. So, listen, we can give props to the SEC when it is due. I think this 2024 schedule is going to be a lot of fun. Interested to see who plays who when, and that will be released likely in the fall. All right, let's move on. It's Running for the Roses here. Thank you for listening. You can subscribe to our show wherever you find your podcast. We're on Spotify, Apple Podcasts. Recently just launched a YouTube channel. You can subscribe to that, posting full show, posting some clips as well, youtube.com/Running for the Roses CFB. All right, let's get to a conference that we're both pretty high on. Lucas,